Hey guys, today we're going to continue in our Unit 1, Part 1 packet. We're going to look at Chapter 2, Descriptive Statistics, Lesson 2.1, Frequency Distribution. So, our first vocab word is frequency. Frequency is the amount of times an event has occurred. We also will talk about cumulative frequency. Is the sum of the current frequency and all of the previous frequencies. So you add up the current one you're looking at plus any previous ones. Also, we're going to talk about relative frequency. And this is the percent of times an event has occurred. So our formula is the frequency divided by that sample size. And the sample size is the whole total number of things that you have counted in your different categories. So a frequency distribution table is a table containing the frequency, relative frequency, and the cumulative frequency. So here's an example of our frequency table. We are going to look at this categorical data of what is the class's favorite color. So let's give some numbers here. Let's say 5 people like red, 2 people like orange, 1 likes yellow, 3 like green, 4 blue, 2 purple, and 1 pink. So these are all the frequencies. We just counted how many people liked red, orange, yellow, green, blue, purple, and pink. So then to find our frequency, we need our frequency for red, which is 5. And then we divide it by our sample size. So if we add all of these together, we will come up with 18. And we found 18 by adding up our frequencies and finding our sample size. So we do 5 divided by 18, and that's going to find our decimal, which we will change into our percent. And we would get 0.278, which is 27.8%. Then we do 2 over 18, because we do that frequency divided by the sample size. We get 0.111 for 11.1%. 1 divided by 18 for yellow, we get 0.056, which is 5.6%. 3 divided by 18 is going to give us 0.167, or 16.7%. 4 over 18 gives us 0.22, 22.2%. 2 over 18 we've already done up top, that's our 11.1%. 1 divided by 18 we've also already done 5.6%. So those are our relative frequencies. So if you just say 5 people liked red, you might not totally grasp what that means, but 27.8% of the class liked red, then you have it relative to the class, henceforth relative frequency. And then our cumulative frequency is our current frequency plus all of our previous frequencies. So for red, the current frequency is 5, and there are no previous frequencies. So that's just 5. The next one, orange, is 2 plus 5, because it's orange plus our red. So we get 7. Yellow is 1 plus 7, because it's yellow plus orange plus red. So we get 8. The next one should be 11, 15, 17, and 18. You'll notice we end at 18, which is our sample size. That's what your cumulative frequency is always going to end with, is your sample size. Sometimes when we're talking about quantitative data, it's not as easy as qualitative categorical data to put into a frequency table because the numbers can have such a range. So we use something called classes. A class in statistics is a grouping of data values that has a lower and an upper limit. And you can see a picture right here to the right showing a class. Usually between 5 and 20 classes. Otherwise, it may be difficult to detect a pattern. To find the class width, you determine the range of the data, which is the largest number minus the smallest number, and divide it by the number of classes, and round up to the nearest whole number. You're always going to round up when you're working with class widths. So let's take a look at that example. The following data set lists the prices in dollars of 30 GPS navigators. Construct a frequency, relative frequency, and cumulative frequency table that has 7 classes. So our number of classes is going to be 7. And the width of our class, first we need to figure out the range. So we need our highest number, which is 450. I'm getting that from the data up above. And our lowest number is 59. So we do 450 minus 59, gives us 391. And we take that 391 and divide it by our 7 classes. That gives us 55.9, which rounded up to the nearest whole number is 56. So we use those and we're going to fill out our lower and upper limits. Remember that your classes cannot overlap. So our lower limit, we're going to start at 59 because that's our lowest data value. And then 59 plus 56 is going to give us 115. We don't want our classes to overlap, so the lower limit of our next one is 116. 116 plus 56 gives us 172. The lower limit of our next one will be 173. So I would pause the video here and try and fill out the rest of your classes, and then come back and get your answers. Hopefully you got a chance to fill up your upper limits and lower limits. Here are the answers for you to check yourself. And we're going to use these lower and upper limits to fill out our frequency table. So we fill in our classes. And what we're going to do next is we're going to take the information from above and we are going to count the frequencies for all of our classes. So if you look at your data at the top of the page, you'll see that your first data point is 90. So you would decide which class 90 goes in, and it would go in that first class, 59 to 115, so you put a tally mark there. And then you look at your next data point and see that it's 130, so you cross out 130. It goes in this category, this class. And then the next one's 400, cross that out, put a tally mark, not there. It needs to go up one right here, 400. And then the next one's 200. It would fall right there. So go ahead and pause the video here and keep counting your frequencies, and then come back for the answer. Okay, and this should be what you got. 5 for our first class, 8, 6, 5, 2, 3, 1. To find our relative frequency, we're going to take our frequency divided by our sample size. You can either count all your numbers or you can read at the top. It says there's 30 navigation systems. So this is going to give us 16.7%, 26.7%, 20%, 5 over 30 again, that'll be that 16.7%. 2 over 30 will give us our 6.7%. 3 over 30 is 10%. And 1 over 30 is 3.3%. Our cumulative frequency, again for our first class, its frequency is 5 and there's nothing before it. For 116 through 172, 8 and 5 make 13. Then we'll have 19, 24, 26, 29, and 30. The last thing we're going to talk about is how we can make some charts for our different types of frequencies. We're going to talk about histograms, which is a bar graph that represents the frequency or relative frequency. Distribution, the horizontal scale, that side-to-side scale is the data values, and the vertical scale, the up and down one, is the frequency or relative frequency. And consecutive bars must touch. So let's create those frequencies and relative frequencies for our data. So we're going to label our classes along the horizontal axis. That's our data values. And then along the vertical axis, we are going to label our frequencies. Since our highest frequency is 8, we're only going to label our vertical axis 1 through 10. So I'm going to go ahead and pause the video here and label your graph, and then come back and we will continue. Okay, hopefully you've got your histogram with its axes labeled. And we're going to start putting in our boxes. So our first class, 59 to 115, had a frequency of 5. So I draw its box. Then my next class had a frequency of 8. And remember, I want my boxes to touch, my bars to touch. So I'm just going to start from one bar and create the next. My next one was 6. And then another 5, 2, 3, and 1. And there we have a frequency histogram. We're going to do kind of the same thing with our relative frequency histogram, except this time our vertical axis will be labeled with our relative frequencies. So go ahead and pause the video here, put your classes alongside the horizontal axis again, and then we're going to label our vertical axis up to 30%, since our highest relative frequency is 26.7. Okay, hopefully you got a chance to get everything labeled. Now let's mark our boxes for our relative frequency. That first class has a relative frequency of 16.7, so we just kind of do our best there. For relative frequencies, I like to label the bars, because your percentages, a lot of times it doesn't hit perfectly at a spot. So then 26.7, then we have our 20%, another 16.7, and then we have a 6.7%, a 10%, and a 3.3%. And there you go, you have a relative frequency histogram. Our last graph for frequency tables is called an OGIV. An OGIV is a cumulative frequency graph. This is a line graph that displays the cumulative frequency of each class at its upper limits. Okay. Each class at its upper limits. The upper limits are marked on the horizontal axis, and the cumulative frequencies are measured on the vertical axis. The graph should start at the lower limit of the first class, the cumulative frequency of 0, and end at the upper limit of the last class. Cumulative frequency equal to the sample size. So you start from 0 and get all the way up to your sample size. Okay, here are some examples of OGIV charts, OGIV graphs. So on our graph, we are going to start with our lower limit of our first class, which was 59. Then we write the upper limits, so we have 115. Then we have 172, 229, 286, 343, 400, and 457. At 159, sorry, not at 159, then we need to label our vertical axis, which we have to go all the way up to our sample size of 30. So let's break that down into fives. Okay, so at 59, we start out at 0. Then 115, we're at a cumulative frequency of 5. At 172, we're at a cumulative frequency of 13. Then for 229, we have a cumulative frequency of 19. For 286, we have a cumulative frequency of 24. For 343, we have 26. For 400, we have 29, and for 457, we reach that ending at 30. So then we just draw little lines to connect each of these. This is a little bit more linear than some of the ones we saw in that example. But there you go. We have an OGIV chart for our data.